This video is entitled External Style and the ID and Class Selectors and is a companion piece to the book So You Want to Learn to Use HTML and CSS, Chapter 5. I'm James Imbrano, PhD, and I'll be taking you through this video presentation. In this video, we're going to talk about creating an external CSS file. We're going to add the link tag to your HTML to tell the browser to bring in the external style sheet. We're going to show you the ID CSS selector and the class CSS selector and how to apply the class attribute to HTML tags. So at the end of this presentation, you will have seen the tag selector, the ID selector, and the class selector within CSS and be able to create an external style sheet and use it. First thing I want to talk about isn't on this slide, but it's creating an external style sheet. What you are going to need to do to work out these examples is to open up a folder where your HTML document is and create a new text file within that folder. That text file needs to have the extension .css instead of .html like your HTML file or .txt like text files and other files, because an external style sheet needs to be .css. Use your text editor, whatever text editor you happen to be using, to open up that new empty file, and we can then start putting our style in. The other thing you need to do is use your text editor to open up your HTML document and add a line that looks kind of like this to the head of your document. So in the previous example, we had the style embedded. Well, remove that and replace it with this single line head, in the head, link href equal the name of your file, whatever you named your CSS file, rel style sheet type text/CSS. The rel and the type, just leave them alone and be sure that you do that the same way, because that tells the web browser what we're linking in and why it would want to link it in, because, oh, it's a style sheet. So be sure that the URL in the href matches the file name that you have on your hard disk that you've saved into your folder exactly. In some previous HTML videos, I showed that we can add an ID attribute to specific HTML tags and then use those in our fragment of a URL. And I said there were going to be some other uses of them. Well, here's one of the uses of an ID on a tag. By putting an ID on a tag, I can create a selector in CSS to go apply the style to that specific tag and no others by putting a pound sign in front of the ID in the selector. So in the CSS file, for instance, I have a tag here, I have an HTML paragraph called coolness that has an ID of coolness. If I wanted to create a selector that picks that paragraph and nothing else, that picks that element and nothing else, I would use the pound coolness selector, pound coolness, open curly brace, put the style, close curly brace, and that would get that one ID element, nothing else. And if that ID doesn't exist, that part of the CSS is just ignored. So you can see that the pound coolness selector would select the first paragraph, but not the second H1. In addition to putting IDs on tags in HTML, we can apply a class to a tag. And a class is an attribute that can be added to any tag. And you can kind of say, well, these tags all kind of belong together. They belong to the same class. So by saying, for instance, here in my example, I've got a paragraph that's hot, I've got an H2 that's hot, and I've got an EM embedded in a paragraph that's hot. So this one style can be applied to multiple types of tags, both flow and phrasing tags. It can be, so by adding a class, I can now create a class selector. And a class selector is the class name with a period in front of it. So the class selector .hot would select those three HTML elements, but it won't select elements without a class or with a different class. So the class selector starts with a period, the ID selector starts with a pound, and the tag level selector, tag name selector, or tag type selector doesn't begin with anything other than just the name of the tag. Here you can see an example of a CSS, an external sheet that we're going to save to a separate file. And it has a comment. It has a body tag or a body selector that would select the body. And because there's only one body, it would select it and applies the background color. It then finds the tag with an ID of author and makes the background color yellow. So if there's a tag with an ID of author, it'll make the background color of that tag yellow. And if there isn't a tag named with an ID of author, it will ignore it. And then it makes all of the tags that have the class warning, the text will be red. Okay, so let's see what that looks like. Let's look at the HTML now that would include that external style sheet. So you can see up atop that we link the externals.css, which is what I named that file when I saved it. And then you can see that the author's name is highlighted yellow because it was selected. You can see that the class warning of all rights reserved and the word important were also selected by class level selection. So you can see that we're again keeping the HTML semantic, keeping it to just meaning, keeping it to just the text, the words, the importance, and all of the style has now been exported to this external style sheet. This concludes this video on external style sheets and the ID and class selectors. This presentation is copyright 2020 by James M. Renault, PhD. All rights are reserved. You can contact me at jim@renejm.com if you have any questions. This work is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial Share-alike 4.0 International License, and I would like to say thank you for watching.